So, back at Athens Airport, about to start the last leg of this epic-ish journey. Today I'll be having two sectors with Lufthansa from here in Athens up to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt up to London City, from whence I will go home for a good sleep. Travelling in business class today, following on from my other reviews of intra-European business class flights, let's see what Lufthansa offers. If that sounds good, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip. Lufthansa and some of its Star Alliance partners check in right up the other end of the terminal from the main entrance, so it was a bit of a hike. One thing I'd learned on my recent travels was that it is always wise to interact with staff on the ground even if you've got a boarding pass, as there can be additional checks required even if you think you've done everything. That was to be the case once again on this flight. I also like having a physical boarding pass, mainly because I collect them, but also because it's not unknown for phones to run out of battery, which can be a challenge if your boarding pass is digital. The business check-in was busier than economy, but I quickly caught the eye of a chap at an economy desk. He was great, very thorough, friendly and efficient. At the time of travel there were no locator form requirements for transiting Germany, but he went through the documentation for my entry into the UK in some detail. He even cross-referenced the day 2 test booking receipt to what I'd put on the passenger locator form. Very thorough, and a boarding card for my Frankfurt to London flight was duly issued. Not that this process turned out to have been necessary, but I'll come back to that in Frankfurt. Then a mini hike back to the security area. My business class ticket gave me access to the priority lane, although everything was pretty quiet and quick. Lufthansa departs from the B gates of Athens Airport, which I am reliably informed is the Schengen area of the airport. And it looked quite a lot nicer than the A wing through which I'd travelled outbound to Cairo. After the obligatory walk through the duty-free area, the terminal had quite a few shops and restaurants and was quite busy. Lufthansa has its own lounge, which surprised me a little, although I suppose the Lufthansa group would have quite a few daily flights to Athens, even if relatively few of them were on Lufthansa metal. Hello. It wasn't a huge lounge, there were no shiny planes to look at, and it didn't have that many seats of huge plushness. But there was a full bar, albeit one requiring the drinks to be served to you, and some very good food. And this, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is how you do food in a pandemic. Individual servings in glass jars, which are easy to sanitise and reuse. Some single-use plastics required for the bread, but a clever and effective way of maintaining a good and varied offering, whilst recognising the need to adapt to the consequences of the you-know-what. Thank you very much. All in all, a very pleasant and a relatively tranquil space, and an hour passed very quickly. Time to head to the gate, where tranquil was not a word you would use. A large number of people were being called forward to have their documentation checked. Airlines really should stop issuing boarding passes online if there needs to be additional checks. The check-in area is the place to conduct those checks, not the gate. The abysmal quality of the gate PA system made it really hard to tell who was being summoned, and the list was repeated 3 or 4 times.
Your attention please, passengers flying Vietnam, Serbia.
Boarding time came and went, and any semblance of organisation had long vanished. There was a priority boarding sign, but it was located in the middle of a seating area, so it was really hard to know how any queue was supposed to develop. When boarding eventually started, I joined the scrum and was through pretty quickly, although Lufthansa's insistence on passengers needing to wear a surgical-grade face mask is a little daft if their boarding process is so chaotic that no one can social distance. On board to be greeted by the obligatory sanitary wipe and off to my seat. 6 rows of business on this A320, although as with most European carriers these days, the curtain can be moved to expand the business section as demand requires. A 3-3 configuration, but with the middle seat blocked off in business. Probably 32 inches of pitch. Seat Guru says there's only 30, but this was clearly more than BA offered on its A321. A table, no shocks there. A coat hook, but no in-seat power and no in-flight Wi-Fi. No goodies waiting for you on the spare middle seat either, although a bottle of water was handed out. Very low profile seats, which I'm sure helps achieve such good legroom without sacrificing comfort, even if there was no headrest. As had been the case on Swissair, the economy buy on board brochure was available in business class, even though we had our own catering. There must be a reason why they do this, although I don't know what it is. If you know, please leave me a comment. A mid-afternoon takeoff, not brilliant weather, but still very pleasant views. About 2.5 hours to Frankfurt, and quite quickly after takeoff a menu arrived. I used it to see whether my camera would focus that close. It couldn't, but I can report that the choices were a stuffed bell pepper or a currywurst. It took me a nanosecond to choose the sausage. I couldn't avoid having a flashback to the bangers and mash I recently had in British Airways business class, and in-flight sausage is obviously the fashion around Europe right now. It won't win awards for presentation, it won't win awards for ambition, and it won't win awards for its extravagance, but it was pretty tasty, even more so when you sprinkled the sachet of curry powder over the top. Complemented by some wine, and all in all, a pretty decent feed. Quite a full flight, although the crew were very attentive with refills, and time passed quite quickly. I'd been up since 2:15 that morning to get my flight out of Cairo, and I'd gone into Athens and wandered around for 3 or 4 hours, so I think the sense of time passing quickly was amplified by me having a nap. Quite a pretty early evening landing into Frankfurt. The disorganisation on boarding meant we left about 40 minutes late, although we made up a little of that time in flight. But my fairly comfortable connection in Frankfurt had evaporated, requiring me to move quicker than I'd hoped through the terminal. It required a brisk walk through an unphotogenic tunnel across to the non-Schengen gates, and by the time I got there, boarding was well underway. No time to explore the lounges, regrettably. And although the nice chap in Athens had thoroughly checked my documents, the gate attendant insisted on doing it again. This annoyed me, as I was already grumpy from the long day I was having. What is the point of undertaking checks if they are only going to be repeated later? But the gate agent was polite and efficient, and I was quickly through. This repetitious bureaucracy is something you need to be prepared for these days, and as with many things, those of us that are well organised and well prepared are punished, as we cannot be readily distinguished from those who are unprepared and uninformed. Then, for some reason, there was another automated document check, and finally I was through to the plane. An Embraer 190 today, with a 2-2 configuration throughout. In business, only one seat on each side of the plane was occupied, and the occupied seat alternated between aisle and window as you moved down the plane. I'd say 32 inches of pitch, and Seat Guru agrees on this occasion. A table and the now usual economy buy-on-board literature. A very scruffy tray thing blocked off the aisle seat, although they all had a slope to them, so if you used them as a tray, things would just slide off, so it wasn't particularly good to look at or to use. 2 jacket hooks on each seat, very helpful for those who travel with 2 jackets. We took off into a Frankfurt sunset for the 1-hour flight into London City Airport. No menus, and quite quickly after takeoff the meal arrived. I chose the beef salad, and once again I cannot recall what the vegetarian option was. Quite tasty, although not particularly memorable, complemented with some wine which was offered shortly afterwards. And soon enough, after a very long day of travelling through 4 countries on 3 flights across 2 airlines, we made the usual dive bomber landing into London City Airport, arriving bang on time. We landed just behind a locked flight from Warsaw, so the immigration gates were busier than they might otherwise have been, but I was still through in about 2 minutes. You see reports of awful immigration queues producing 4-hour waiting times, but the 2 times I've re-entered the UK recently have been absolutely fine. London City is a particularly pleasant airport to arrive into, not least because, on public transport at least, it's about an hour closer to my home than Heathrow, Gatwick or Stansted. So to wrap this up, I paid £406 for my return flight from London to Athens, out on Swiss, back on Lufthansa. It's really handy that it's so easy to mix and match flights on different airlines within the Lufthansa group. I could perhaps have done that routing a little cheaper, but I was happy to pay a premium for flights that earned miles into Aegean's frequent flyer scheme. I'll talk more about that in an upcoming video. Lufthansa was great. 2 uneventful flights, which is how you want all flights to be. Good service, good food, and apart from the dodgy ground handling at the gate in Athens, a solid ground experience. Good all round, but unlike my Swiss flights, nothing was great or particularly memorable. I'll remember the currywurst for a while, not because it was an outstanding dish, but because it was an unusual thing to offer. But the whole experience was functional, efficient, and a bit bland. Which is great if that's what you're looking for, but if I were to do that trip again, I'd probably fly Swiss in both directions. So thanks for watching. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you're new, and please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Have you flown Lufthansa? Does this resonate with the experience that you had? So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again in the next one. Goodbye.